Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spirituality and Business interview series. I have with me today Mariaestela. Mariaestela is an amazing spiritual business coach who supports her clients in growth and expansion from within by providing a sacred, powerful space for bringing big visions to life. I'm so happy to have you with us today, Mariaestela. Is there anything that you want to tell us before we get it started?
No, I'm so grateful to you, Shaq, for doing this, for allowing me this opportunity to share about my spiritual path. I'm just hoping that, and my prayer is that it may serve those who are where I was or have been, so that we can support the world.
Absolutely. And that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. So can you tell us a little bit about your own spiritual path?
Yes, I can. I guess I'm not really sure when my spiritual path started, or I'm not really sure what. I think I know when I became aware that I was on a spiritual path, and that was back in, I think, 2009. I was a very successful key account manager. I was working for, one of the largest acquirers in Denmark. Well, the largest in Denmark and one of the largest in Scandinavia.
Wow.
And I was in a very corporate environment. I had everything that you're supposed to have in the world. I had, great apartment, an amazing salary. I had credit cards. I was flying all over Europe, negotiating $1 million contracts.
Oh, wow.
I had a car. I had everything. I was traveling. I was buying clothes. I had everything that you're supposed to have. I say it's supposed to have with,
yes, of course. I think most of us understand that.
Yes. But I couldn't feel my heart. I couldn't feel my heart. And, almost every night when I came home, I don't think I had a depression, but I was feeling very, very sad. And I had this notion that there was something else and there was something more. And while I loved what I did and I had amazing colleagues and amazing clients, then that was simply just not for me. And so I would say that my spiritual path, once I quote unquote awoke, was through A Course in Miracles. And it was through the doing the work of the workbook and the textbook and implementing that into my everyday life that I slowly but surely grew that strength. Because I see when we talk about spirituality or our connection to source or God or whatever we want to call it, I see that as a muscle. I see it as a muscle that we're born with, and that some of us growing up, some of us are born open. I don't necessarily think that I was, but I did have a connection. But as we grow up, that connection is, it withers because we're not being taught. We're not being taught from a early age to actually be in connection with our inner self, our higher selves, our intuition.
Exactly.
And so what A Course in Miracles helped me do was, strengthen that muscle. It was like working out. It was like, if you want to run a marathon, you're going to go get some, miles in your legs. And that was what A Course in Miracles was for me. And slowly but surely, I implemented and did the work, because I think that's one of the parts that's very missed in our world, is that we're supposed to have this, I had this awakening. I hear my calling. I know, this is it. And then we just sit down and we expect it to just land at our feet, when in fact, it's about our being and our doing in the world. And it's about training, strengthening that connection. And so for the past, I would say almost 10 years, if not more, that is the work that I do. And while I no longer work actively with A Course in Miracles, the principle of love is love is love, and love as the way is what is ingrained in me and everything that I do and everything that I am.
Absolutely.
And it's not in because very often love get this this bad rep for being, you know, fluffy and light.
Yeah.
And I really, I dare anyone who's done the work to say that it's light and fluffy, because I know that it is. Yeah, exactly. I love how you're just you're just nodding. It is grueling work. It is deep work. It is at times heartbreaking, but it is so worth it. I mean, it's. I wish I could go back and tell her, the one that was on the floor 10 years ago, crying her eyes out, letting her know that this, I think she knew that this was the possibility, but I don't think that she believed in it. And I mean, I just wish she wouldn't have heard me. She wouldn't have been able to hear me. And she would be like, whatever. Yeah, so I'm not talking, when I mention love, I mean the powerful source of all that we are, all that we always have been, all that we always will be. And that's also why I don't believe in I don't believe that we're being tested. I believe that we're being strengthened. I don't believe in an external source outside of ourselves. I don't believe that God is an old man who will judge us on Judgment Day. I believe that God is you, and it's me, and it's the energy and the vibration from which everything expands. And that's what I do in my work, and that's what I support my clients with. It's what I'm here for in my own life. And, you know, I'm just here to be a demonstration of that. And it is, again, through the work that we do, that we quote unquote manifest, that we create, that we build. But it is only once we have reached that point of contact with our source that we're able to do that.
Yeah.
I can't remember your question. It was about my spiritual path. I hope that.
Absolutely. Yes. It was just, tell us about your spiritual path, and that absolutely answered it. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your journey, for opening up about some of the hard times. I also really love saying that you wish you could go back to your past self, but also recognizing that your past self wouldn't listen. One thing that I've personally been kind of reflected on at various points is, you know, if I could go back, was there anything anyone could have said to me? And I keep coming back to, I just wasn't ready to hear it. No. I actually look back now and realize people did say things to me that were like, hey, do this. And I just wasn't ready to hear it.
Yes. And there's such a deep love, and that's why I think compassion is one of the biggest things for anyone on this path, is to have compassion. Because I see it, you know, in the work that I do. I have masterminds and I have group work, and I see how compassion, being able to hold space for ourselves even when we're in our darkest moments, is such a key point. And also understanding that you did the best that you could with the things that you were given. And in hindsight, of course you would do it differently. Well, I'm actually not sure I would have done it differently, because truth be told, even with all of the dark nights of my soul, even with the rudest awakenings, that allowed me to shed myself of limiting beliefs, of self-sabotage, of holding myself back, of being voiceless, of being out and proud, you know, being spiritual. I for a long time felt held back by the idea that how can you be a spiritual business coach? Like, because spiritual and business doesn't seem to, and to me now I don't, because I've worked with it, you know, I've done a lot of, you know, startups and worked in a lot of different industries, and know a lot about strategy and structure and organization and all of that. I love that.
Oh, me too.
But exactly. And I can't imagine not blending that with your intuition and your vision and your inner guidance and sensing things that are, and I think that's part of what happens when you do your spiritual work, is that you lift the veils to see what previously was hidden. It's and so so I'm here for those who want to, because many of my clients, they always say, like, I can't believe I just said that, because some of the things that say, go very out to infinity and beyond. And it's so great. It's also why I have now 2 podcasts, but in those I want to be as spiritual AF as possible, because I don't see how, I think that that's what the world needs. The world needs the blend of the two.
I completely agree.
I was rambling.
No, you're grand. I completely agree too. Like, that's very important to say. I feel the same way, and I'm just like you. I love the strategy. Like, I'm a business nerd.
Yes.
But the spiritual also has a very strong impact on my businesses.
Yes.
And so for my clients, I try to help them merge the two. And when I see people try to build businesses just using strategy, ignoring their heart, ignoring their soul, they end up building businesses that they're not actually happy with.
Yes.
Which is not fun. And then if they try to just focus on the spiritual and say, oh, because I have the spirituality, I don't need to worry about the strategy. There's a ceiling. You can get pretty far doing that, but there is a distinct ceiling that I've seen consistently.
Yes, exactly. I'm high-fiving and chest bumping you. Yes, absolutely. And to me, that is, so part of my foundation is merging what I call the divine feminine essence and the divine masculine essences. And also healing the shadow aspects of those parts, because I think that's where our world has been for a very long time. It's been in the old paradigm, in an old fear-based paradigm of having to push, force, and coerce. And the thing that I see, and I know this because this was my own struggle, as it often is. This was my own struggle. I'm a go-getter. I was used to doing. I was used to just getting things done. And I was very good at that in my old life, and when I say old life, I mean old life in this life. I guess when we talk about spirituality, I'm not talking about past lives. I'm talking about past life in this lifetime.
Yes.
And so when my divine feminine essence rose, and when my heart cracked open, and I came to the place where I knew what I was here to do, but couldn't put it into action, I struggled for the longest time. Like you said, I was doing everything, that I was being told by experts. I was following old paradigm strategies. And it wasn't until, for a very long time, I stopped doing anything, which is not something I can recommend if you want to have a thriving business. So I stopped doing, because everything I did was out of alignment with who I am. And it wasn't until I realized, it's because my divine, because I see the way that I see or view the world now, the divine feminine essence is sweeping across the globe. She's running through everyone. Everyone is feeling her call to be of the heart, be of love, be of service. But we've been conditioned in a patriarchal, archaic society to do in a way that's out of alignment with the divine. And so you have to activate, engage, learn how to do from a space of divine masculine, is what I call. And that's what I had to learn in order to get to where I am right now. Yes.
Absolutely. So the people watching this, we have a broad range of backgrounds and experience levels. So would you mind talking a little bit more about the idea of divine masculine, feminine, specifically the shadow area, because I know that's something that not everyone is familiar with.
Yes. Yes. So as souls, we come into human existence, and many of us, myself included, for a while, do not understand why on earth we would have come here, because we know where we're from, and we know that that there's something else. We know that there is a oneness that exists, and that space is, I can even feel it now, like when you may experience it if you go into the meditation, or if you walk in nature, and you have this sense of complete and utter satisfaction that is not dependent on anything in this world, but just being who you are. It's just, and I believe that we as souls come into this world to support it in its awakening, in its healing, and in its transformation. But coming into the world, we also come into the world of duality, of polarity, of experiencing differences. And that is because that's what's most, relevant for our soul's evolution. So we come into the world and we experience the difference between hot and cold, and wet and dry, and high and low. Hard and soft. We experience all of these different dualities, and within ourselves, we also experience the difference or the polarities between feminine and masculine. And when I say feminine or masculine, I don't mean it's not gender based. So it's not male or female. It's every one of us has these two polarities when we're in the world. We have the polarity of the feminine and the masculine. And for a very long time, about 5,000 years, the polarity of the divine feminine has been suppressed. She's been oppressed. She's been, cast out. And because of that, there's been a rise of our shadow aspects. So both men and women, and I would say, I can't speak for those who don't relate to genders, but I would say that they too have that feminine and masculine polarity. But what happens is that when one part of your divine self is disavowed, then the shadow aspect rises. And so for the female aspect, that is, we begin to rely on strategies of manipulation. We get feelings of being jealous, of being frustrated, of not getting our way. So we begin to use, manipulation and deceiving strategies in order to get what we want. And for within the masculine realm, it's about suppression, it's about oppression, it's about abuse, it's about forcing, it's about coercing, it's about in order to get what you want, not realizing. And those two are based in fear. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily see them as bad. I see them as gateways, because once you realize that that's what's going on, they are amazing opportunities for you to go through, to look at, to use in order to heal those parts of yourself. Yeah. And so the love-based aspects or essences are your divine feminine and your divine masculine essences. And when you combine those two, you have what's called the sacred marriage or divine union. And that is when you're in flow. That's the oneness that I mentioned before. And so does that answer your question?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for sharing that. I really love pointing out that, like, the shadow aspects, like the what we would normally label as like the negative manifestations, that you don't see them as bad, but as a gateway to opportunity. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. And also, because you brought it up, I don't want to derail this, but just really quick comment. I'm non-binary. I don't identify as male or female. And so just because you mentioned that, honestly, the divine masculine and feminine doesn't resonate with me at all. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, I completely respect other people's beliefs. Yes. But for me, like, I feel more like a third-party observer when it comes to gender issues. And
Yes.
if you look throughout history, that role has kind of come into play in so many different cultures.
Yes.
So that's just because you brought that up, I just kind of wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. So this is such a gift, because as I've been doing this work, I have realized, I've looked at it and say, okay, I've had the idea that this was for all quote unquote genders or non-genders, but I'm so glad you underscored that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah. And I think that part of the issue I find with it is that it's been made into male or female.
Yeah.
So to me, like I said, the feminine and masculine does not mean that you're either man or woman. It means that that there are parts of ourselves that we have disavowed and are not honoring or using in our connection or our doing. I know that, for example, if we look at religion for centuries and centuries and centuries, not centuries, within religion and within the Christian religion, the divine feminine was disavowed because they never acknowledged Mary Magdalene as they do acknowledge her as the apostle of the apostles, blah, blah, blah. But they're not very keen on clearing up the misconception that she was a whore or a prostitute, and not recognizing her for the teacher and the master that she actually was, together with Yeshua. And those two form the sacred union or divine marriage. And I think that because of that, since then, for millennia, men has suffered just as hard as women has. Because they've not been allowed to fully embody or express their divine feminine within. Everything is tickling into me because I want to know more about the way that you see this.
If you want, we can keep talking about that, but I don't want to like derail your interview because I could talk about this for ages.
No, I think that maybe you should share a little bit more, because I think it's valuable. It's very valuable for people to hear who don't feel as though this resonates with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, not directly related to the transgender issue, but related to the Christianity, I've also found a little bit of evidence that the Virgin Mary was originally the Holy Ghost. So that even ties into it as well. I am not nearly enough of a scholar to want to present on that, but that resonated with me a lot. I've seen a few people who talk about doing the rosary, like specifically for Mary. And obviously she's a very, very important figure in Christianity.
And the whole idea, it's so interesting, because the whole idea of us, again, of gender, I saw that within the native cultures of America, I think they had like 5 or 7 different gender types, or
it varied. Like there's so many different cultures that I'm
and so to me, that's part of the patriarchy. That's part of what the patriarchy has created. It's created these boxes that we're now locked into, that this is how, because now we have to, in order for me to understand you, I have to put you into this box so I can understand who you are. Oh, yes. Yeah. No. That's, to me, that's not love. To me, that's not love. To me, love is the way. And how am I to know? Like, I can only love you for who you are. And who you are is who you are. It's not, So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and I've known a few First Nations people who, in like Native American people, who talked about how they only really identify as transgender kind of in white culture, like in their own culture, among their own people, they're accepted as who they are. Like there isn't that distinction.
Yes. And that is, that, you know, that's one of the things that truly breaks my heart, is when people don't feel accepted or met or heard for who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of their, I don't even know, because it's not even a matter of sexuality.
No.
It's just a matter of identification. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that, you know, that is one of the things that breaks my heart, when across the globe that people are being shunned or ostracized or whatever for something as simple as that. That's just, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the work. That's part of what I do, because I believe that in supporting, you know, spiritual entrepreneurs, Magdalene's Rising, with their expansion from within, from heart, from love, from source, then we create a world that is more embracive, more loving, more compassionate, more just for all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm kind of trying to think of the best way to word this, because it's a somewhat delicate subject, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm being dismissive, but one of the reasons I think that the masculine and feminine doesn't totally resonate with me is because I've been so heavily in the transgender community that a lot of the things that we, society as a whole, takes for granted as male or female, I don't have that association anymore. Like, more of the people, I have personally known more men go through pregnancy than women, like just me personally. Now, obviously, if you look at the statistics, that's not normal, but something that for most people is so innately female, feminine. For me, I've seen people with beards go through it more often than not, you know, and when you really get into transgender culture a lot more, you can't assume, like, there's a lot of assumptions that we make that we aren't aware that we make, like about people's bodies and their genitals and their lived experiences, that when you're around enough transgender people, you have no idea, like, unless you start asking really invasive questions. Yeah. So just a lot of assumptions, just, I can't make them. And so it's one of the reasons that this whole idea of masculine and feminine, I'm like, okay, well, how do you define that when we have this whole group of people that goes completely against it?
Yes, that is so beautiful. And to me, again, like, to me, that's because, to me, feminine and masculine doesn't mean male or female. It is, it are the essences that we carry.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I know that it exists from seeing other people. Like, feminine and masculine, they have very distinctive meanings, and I totally recognize that. It's just something that I personally, I'm like, okay, I know it exists because y'all tell me it exists.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a certain willingness in wanting to have our, is it beliefs or views of the world rattled, in terms of when you mention men going through pregnancies and so forth. There is a, you know, when we have these boxes, it's like a safe space, and this is how the world is, and this is how the things work, and so forth. So it's also about being willing to see what you may not recognize, or I'm not sure what I did, but do you get what I'm saying? That it's the because if you've been conditioned to believe that this is how the world is, and so forth, you know, we as humans, we look for, you know, comfort and safety, and so there's safety in those structures, and when those structures are then rattled, then we become uncomfortable, or
we lose our sense of security, we lose our anchoring in the world. And part of the reason I mentioned that is because that particular one is, like, for so many people, it's the bridge too far. Like, they can accept transgenderism in so many different forms, but accepting a man being pregnant is like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine the way that I view the world is then
Mm-hmm.
imagine how they then feel.
Yeah.
I mean, and I also say, who am I to? I mean, I'm not, who am I to judge? How do I know that what I hold is right? Like, I
Exactly.
don't, that's not the way that I
Yeah.
view this world. Or at least that's not how I try to view this
Mm-hmm.
world. Because
Yeah.
um, how do I know that how do I know that my structure is the right one? Like, how
Yeah.
can I know? Like, and
Absolutely.
how can, and that again leads back to the thing with, it's not necessarily that the shadow aspects are not, I don't see them as negative or bad. They're just a way to expand. Yeah. Yeah. This was like, ooh.
Not where we intended to go.
No, no, but I think I mean, I don't know. Yeah, to me, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and as long as you're happy with it, I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I really appreciate um, is that I've found that in overall entrepreneurs tend to be the most open to, having their paradigms shaken up and to saying, maybe I don't know. I don't totally understand what you're talking about, but I respect that you're saying it basically.
Yes.
So it's one of the things I really appreciate about being an entrepreneur is that I've found the most people who are open-minded, if not completely supportive in this space, which is pretty
Yes.
amazing.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because love is love is love, and love does not distinguish between, because you don't look like me, because you don't think like me, because you don't um, have the same gender.
Mm-hmm.
What is it called? Gender
Identity,
identity
whatever,
as me.
expression.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
Love
absolutely.
is love is love. Love is, to me, that, love is the way.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned wanting to talk about before
Yes.
this call was the two most common imbalances you see in spiritual entrepreneurs, and
Yes.
that's something that I would really like to hear your take on.
Yes. So, and this, and this again is funny because these two are based in, excuse me, the masculine and the divine essences. So some may not resonate with this. And I think this is so, because there are two things that I always say. Number one is elevate the teachings and not the teacher. That's number one. And number two is, yes. And number two is take what serves you and leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you do not identify with the divine feminine or with the feminine or the masculine essences, then maybe listen.
Mm-hmm. For what you can use.
Listen, yeah, and listen, because listen underneath, because if you don't identify with those, you probably have a quote unquote different hearing. And when I say different, I don't mean bad or negative. I mean, you have another way of hearing things.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's a lesson or an inspiration in some way for you as well.
Yeah.
So the way that I see it is that yes, like I said, there are two very common imbalances that I see. And one is what I call the headless chicken. That's when you've been when you're not connected to your source. That's what I call the divine feminine. When you're not connected to your wisdom, to your gnosis, to your knowledge, you probably had an awakening. You probably felt her rise within. You probably did the work to connect with your heart, but then you got lost in what all the experts told you to do. And so you started running, doing without stopping. And it, like you said before, when people disavow their spirituality and then begin to just use strategy,
Yeah.
and you begin to do, and you find that you become more and more frustrated, more and more irritated. You find that nothing works,
Mm-hmm.
or you may find yourself to be successful, but completely lack of, not satisfied and frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where I was at those 10 years ago when I was crying on my bathroom floor. What I was doing, but I was not connected to my source.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
I've known a handful of people who've actually had to shut down six-figure businesses that they'd spent so much time building because they woke up one day and realized, I hate my business. Like they had done the Headless Chicken thinking, oh, I'm not satisfied because, I'm missing marketing or I'm missing this or I'm missing that. And then one day they woke up and realized, no, this business just isn't right for me. As you can imagine, that is a terrifying thing to have to do.
Yes, exactly. And to me, the way, like I said, and I think I've said it plenty of times now, the way is love. So it's about finding a way to do, and that is where the healing and the activation of your divine masculine comes in, because that part, like being in the headless chicken space, that's part of the shadow masculine. That's where you think that if you stop running, you'll fall behind, not knowing that you're always at the right time, at the right place, and you can never be behind or not enough and all that. So that's that space. And then the second part is what I call the lazy chicken. And I'm sorry for these names. It's really, because I know they don't sound very nice, but it's like they just came to me. So I'm going to blame spirit. But it's the lazy chicken. And that's where you're so heavenly heavily in tune with your divine feminine, and you receive downloads after downloads after downloads, but you're unable to activate your divine masculine essence of doing. You're unable to add strategy, as you would say, and to do from a space of love. So because it's out of resonance, that it is unaligned, that it is based in fear, and so you don't want to do, so that you become lazy. And if the longer you stay quote unquote lazy, you fall into the shadow realm of the feminine, where you again become jealous, you become deceiving, you become conniving, you become frustrated, angry, irritated, that you can't seem to bring to life that which you're here to birth. And for both of these two imbalances, of course, the way is love, and it's to activate, engage, and heal and do from a space of love. And very often that looks like taking, very, very small steps compared to what you've been used to. It's about acknowledging yourself. It's about celebrating your accomplishments every day, all day. It's about showering yourself with love for everything that you are and everything that you do, whether or not you quote unquote believe that it's enough. And it's about insisting on doing from a space of love and service. So those are the two, and I have 2 articles about them. I'm going to send them to you so you can include them, or there's a link so people can read more about them if they want to.
And those are under the video.
Yes, and those two imbalances are also, those are usually the clients that I work with are usually in one or the other. And the quote unquote miracles that we see when you begin to infuse love into every aspect of who you are and what you do is beyond this world. It is deeply satisfying, and it is not dependent on anything in this world. So yes, you may have more clients and you may have a business, but in truth, it's more about being who you are, doing what you're here to do, giving you that sense of deep satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and for everything that we talked about today. I know it didn't go quite the way that we expected it to, but
No.
I think you were able to at least touch on everything that you intended to, which I really appreciate how open you were about sharing your own path and having this discussion, because it's not a discussion that I see people having very often, and I do think that needs to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. And I know that you already talked a little bit about those links. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we go?
Sure. Well, I don't know if it's relevant for people, but if you do find yourself to be in the space of the headless chicken, or you know, the what did I call it? The lazy duck, then I have an opt-in. I have a freebie that's called Divine Clarity and Inspired Action, where I take you through, you know, a short process of basically downloading everything. People can probably see. So the result of what you do in the Divine Clarity is actually what I have up here. This is from a 6-week healing journey that I do. And this, like, the posts that you see are based, like, that was the original. That's how you start the process, and then you begin to gain clarity throughout, and actually also activate. You get the action steps, so that what you need to do, the first next step. It's not about 1,000 steps, but it's about taking that first next step. I'm going to include that as well, so people can get that. Yeah,
fantastic. Again, that guide is down below the video, so absolutely make sure that you take the time to check that out.
Zach, before we go, can I just say thank you so much for holding this space for, you know, this part has been, you know, there's been part of this episode that seems like transmission, and I just want to thank you so much for holding that space. It's been an honor and a pleasure and a true blessing to be here with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm glad it was so powerful for you. I'm really happy with the way that this whole interview series has been going. I'm very grateful to everyone who took the time to be interviewed, and also to all of you watching for being a part of this journey and this conversation. So again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone who's watching. Right?
Thank you.